Hi, welcome back, and thanks for checking in on the status of my Big Heli challenge. I think the previous format, where I sliced in clips from my flight videos where I learned some key concepts, worked really well. I got some great feedback for it, so I'm going to continue doing exactly that for future videos. So today I'm going to start off by talking about my routine after I put the helicopter on the takeoff area. I walk over to the pilot station, and here's what I mentally rehearse as well as sometimes saying it out loud.
Alright, throttle hold is off, timer start.
So as you can see, I'm trying to build a routine where I take the throttle hold off. That means the helicopter is ready for flight. It also gives me a chance to look around and make sure that no one's in the area, as well as yelling takeoff so that everybody around me at the flight club knows that I'm about to take off, and just to have a eye and ear open for the helicopter. Next thing I do is start the timer. My battery gives me about 4 minutes of good flight time. I don't want to run it anything past that, but I've left enough of a buffer that once the timer goes off, I have about 20 or 30 seconds to land. Next, I also want to remember to turn on the GoPro, because I missed recording a very important flight, as you will see later, or not, and I'll tell you a bit more about that flight soon. Another safety tip is when you're walking over to the heli, either to put it to take off or to bring it back after you've done your landing, is always to make sure that you've got your throttle hold switch on, but also keep your left thumb on the throttle and collective lever and make sure it's pushed down. Just another safety feature that you can sort of work into your routine to make sure that no disasters happen. If you've been following my videos, you'll know that I was having a bit of trouble taking off and landing smoothly. If you haven't seen those videos, go back and watch those episodes. They're brilliant. You'll love them, I promise. But the issue was I would have takeoffs like this, where I would get into the air and then I would have to correct in every which way to get the helicopter stable, and then I was up and running. So somebody at the flight field pointed out to me that there's a better way to do this. You spool up the heli and you let it get light on the skids. So just before it's about to leave the ground, it's going to almost show you the attitude that it's going to behave in as you lift off. So if it's leaning a bit forward, just give it a little bit of backward cyclic, or if it's left, just give it a bit of right. And you'll see that it really helps take off much smoother, and you're able to just lift off straight up off the ground and also hover right away and not have to sort of shoot up into the sky just to make sure you're clear of the ground. And thanks to the person who gave me that tip. You know who you are. So after about 5 or 6 sessions on the helicopter, I was starting to get comfortable with just hovering it and letting it do its thing, but making sure that I was always in control. I also get a chance to fly it in quite heavy winds to see what it reacts like, and so far everything went really well. So my next step was to put some of those things that I had learned in the simulator to practice, which is hovering at 45 degrees on either side. Also trying to hover the helicopter at 90 degrees, so the side of the helicopter is facing me, again on the left side and on the right side. While doing the side hovers, I would also spin the heli around into nose-in orientation, but always knowing which way to spin the heli back to reorient myself in case I didn't think I was in full control. Just doing nose-in for even 2 or 3 seconds started giving me the confidence that I needed to do a few circuits and do a few figure eights. They might not look pretty, I can tell you that, but I think they get the job done in terms of really moving the helicopter around and getting a feel for how it reacts through different turns. I can say that I'm getting much better at takeoffs, not really worrying about the wobbles or having to gain control of the heli very quickly, but landings are still a bit of trouble. So the best thing I've learned is to make sure that the tail isn't pointing directly at you, because you really lose depth perception at that point. The tail kind of gets lost in the fuselage and you're not quite sure what's going on. So it's nice to have the tail pointed slightly away from you in either direction, whatever you feel comfortable, and then trying to land the helicopter. Isn't it always the case that when you're about to land your plane or helicopter that Mother Nature will throw you a curveball? It'll suddenly get gusty or windy, and you just have to work with the elements, and it made me a better pilot, or it's making me a better pilot, I should say. I'm just getting better at it every day, every time I try, every time I fly. One thing to really watch out for when you're landing is a tail strike. That happens when your tail rotor ends up hitting the ground. For my bigger helicopter, I do have a tail fin which keeps the tail boom off the ground with enough clearance so that the tail blades don't hit the ground. During one of my landings, I guess the tail fin found a little divot in the ground and sank below the level of the clearance of the blades, and I ended up having a tail strike. Luckily, I was able to catch it and get off the ground and find a better, safer spot to land. But just something to keep in mind if you're not landing on smooth grass or on an even surface. As I got more and more comfortable with the helicopter and the way it moved around in space, I was experimenting with some quick pirouettes, which meant just spinning the helicopter around using the rudder a full 360 degrees. Just did that in both directions to see what it felt like. And compared to my micros, I can tell you that this thing holds rock solid. It's amazing to see the response and agility of the helicopter when you do this maneuver. A lot of fun, and definitely lets you feel the limits of the helicopter, because if you're in nose in orientation and you feel like you're losing control, it's nice to know how much rudder to give to spin the tail back around and reorient yourself to get yourself back into control. Another super useful tip that it's guaranteed to save your heli is check your battery voltage before you take off. Don't do what I did. The night before, I charged my batteries, or I thought I charged my batteries because I was charging 4 or 5 other batteries. Turns out I didn't charge this one. So after about 30 seconds of flight, the helicopter was just not climbing at all. I was at full collective and it was holding steady. Okay, it must be the wind. Give it another 5 seconds and the heli starts to drop. I immediately think, oh no, I need to get this onto solid ground, because I was flying over quite a pit, and if the helicopter would have gone down there, it would have been big trouble. I got lucky and the helicopter came down, stayed on both skids, and just sort of bounced once and stayed upright. I got very lucky. We looked things over and everything looked okay, so far, that did not bite me in the butt, but just an easy thing to check. Just plug in the battery voltage meter. As inaccurate as these things might be, at least they'll give you an indication of whether you've just forgotten to charge it or if they actually are ready to go. This guy just came in a day ago. It's the Hobby King Power Analyzer, but this is a much better readout of the battery voltage levels and the capacity left than this. So I would recommend grabbing one of these if you can. It will again just give you a bit more information. It also balances the batteries if they're not balanced, and it does that right on the fly. So that's a nice feature to have as well. As I get more and more comfortable with the helicopter, I'm starting to get into doing a few circuits and doing some figure eights. They might not look like figure eights, or they might not be complete circuits, but I think every time I fly, I progress more and more into getting confident into finishing that figure eight or finishing that full circuit. As always, knowing how your helicopter reacts and the limits of your helicopter will help you get out of trouble. If you feel like you're losing orientation or not quite sure what the helicopter is doing, just spin it around, get a tail in, and get control of it. I'm doing my best to make sure that I'm balanced on both sides and comfortable turning left and right. I have trouble with left-handed turns in circuits and in figure eights, so I'm keeping at it, and I'm also putting in a good bit of stick time in the simulator to help me overcome that mental hurdle. So let's take a look at our final video. Oh wait, no, we can't, because this happened. Yeah, I feel like it was eventually going to happen, but it happened yesterday. Don't know where to begin with this story, but I did end up hitting the ground pretty hard. I did hit throttle hold right before it hit the ground, so it might have saved a few other parts, but it looks like it's going to need quite a few replacements as well as a bit of work because it ended up in the sand. So that's gotten into all the crevices and bearings, which I'm going to have to flush out and clean out to make sure it doesn't cause any other trouble in the future. So let's have a moment of silence for the first 15 flights that went well and the next one not so well. So of course I'm a bit brokenhearted as well as sad that I was making such good progress in terms of learning how the helicopter was working and getting into forward flight, and then this happened. I don't want to say I was getting too comfortable or I was getting complacent. It was just, I guess it happens. Everybody at the field was so supportive. I cannot believe the camaraderie and the support that you get from a local club when stuff like this happens. People lent me advice, they've lent me some of their tools to make sure that I can get back up in the air. They were hoping that I'll be out next week. I'm not sure if I'll have all the parts in time because I just checked the local hobby store and they don't stock everything, so it might be tricky to get back up in the air by next week. But I'm going to do my best. A few people also reached out to me, sent me really long detailed emails on what to look for, how to do it, what parts I should look for. So this is just amazing. It's helping me not feel as terrible as I did when I heard the big thump when it hit the ground. I replay that sound over and over in my head. It's probably not healthy, but I can't help but think I could have saved it. So here's what happened. I was flying sort of with the sun at the corner of my eye, and I was about to do a forward flight circuit, and I just lost a bit of orientation. So I spun the tail around and said, okay, now I'm tail in, now let's go again. So I gave it a bit of right stick and right rudder, let's go. But it started going left, so naturally, reactive instinct, give it more right stick, and I was actually nose in, which made the helicopter go left, 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 left into the ground. Yeah, I don't know what else to say other than it's a lesson learned. I'm really being cautious of where I fly and what time I fly because having the sun in the wrong place is going to cause some of these problems. So just be very careful where you're flying. Tree lines are a real pain in the butt because you can lose your helicopter and you can lose which way it's facing because of the lack of contrast. And also having the tail pointed exactly at you, you sort of lose depth perception. Which way is the helicopter going? Is it even leaning forward? Is it leaning backward? It helps if you look at the rotor disc, but when it's far away from you and you can't quite see the blades, you're relying on the fuselage. So I'm still getting used to being able to spot the direction of helicopter and making sure that I know where it is in space at all the time. Well, that's it for now. Like I said before, I hope I don't have to do any rebuild videos, but I'm going to have to rebuild it. I'm no expert, so I don't think I'm going to put out a build video, but I will let you know how it goes in terms of putting this baby back up in the air as soon as I can, because I was getting really confident with flying it, and it's just a little disappointing that I have to spend some time putting it together. But like someone said at the field, I'll learn lots about the mechanical parts of the helicopter and get really in tune with how it works, and it'll just make me a better pilot. And apparently you get quicker at repairs. Didn't quite want to hear that one either, but c'est la vie, right? Cheers.